Did you just wipe that dirty mop near my 15,000 heels? Her voice sliced through the air like a blade. Stay in your place. People like you don't even belong in this building. And just like that, the entire lobby of FutureCore froze. Investors paused mid-sip. Journalists looked up from their cameras. Even the holographic display of the AI model seemed to glitch for half a second, as if shocked by the venom in her voice. In the center of the marble floor, a man in a navy blue janitor uniform stood quietly. One hand still holding a mop, the other resting lightly against a stainless steel bucket. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He didn't even blink. His name Jeremiah Brooks, age 39, father of one. 6 months into a contract job no one at FutureCore bothered to notice. To them, he was just the guy who cleans at night. But what they didn't know, what Miranda Vail, the billionaire CEO who just publicly humiliated him in front of half of Silicon Valley, would soon learn, was that Jeremiah Brooks wasn't just here to mop floors. He was here to burn the house down, brick by brick, wire by wire, from the inside out. Because behind that mop was a microphone. Behind that quiet smile was a federal badge. And behind that man she'd just insulted was 6 months of recorded crimes that could destroy an empire. So before you scroll, before you click away, ask yourself this: what happens when the person you think is beneath you is the one who holds your fate in their hands? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's not even about justice. It's about what happens when arrogance meets preparation. And tonight, in the heart of San Francisco, in front of cameras, investors, and a live stream with over 200,000 people watching, that meeting is about to begin. Jeremiah didn't say a word. Not yet. He simply tilted his head, eyes still fixed on the woman standing 15 feet away. Miranda Vail, CEO of FutureCore Technologies, the media darling of Silicon Valley. Dressed in a tailored white suit that probably cost more than his annual rent, Miranda stood with one hand on her hip and the other holding her champagne flute like a weapon. She expected him to shrink, to stutter, to apologize like so many before him had. But Jeremiah just watched. The silence in the grand lobby deepened. Guests shifted in their heels. Someone near the back pulled out their phone, recording discreetly. The energy in the room had changed, not just awkwardness, anticipation. Miranda took a step closer. You think this is funny? She snapped. You think ruining a product launch is some kind of joke? Still, Jeremiah said nothing. Instead, he slowly straightened his back. Not defiant, not aggressive, but with the kind of presence that makes a room pay attention. And then, he spoke. His voice was calm, smooth, like a man who had measured every word before letting it out into the world. Ma'am, he said quietly, the only thing I tried to clean tonight was the mess in front of me. A few gasps, a stifled laugh somewhere in the back. Miranda's face flushed red, not from embarrassment, from rage. She barked, "Get this man out of here now." But no one moved, not security, not staff, not even Richard, the VP of operations, who had once fired an entire team for being 5 minutes late. That's when Jeremiah reached into the inside pocket of his janitor's jacket. No one breathed. And then, he pulled out a badge, shiny, federal, and placed it on the marble podium where Miranda had just been presenting her AI model minutes earlier. Jeremiah Brooks, he said evenly, Senior Investigator, Federal Trade Commission, Economic Crimes Division. The silence that followed could have swallowed the entire building. Miranda's mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time in her career, she had no script. Jeremiah looked around the room, making eye contact with every executive, every engineer, every intern who had ever looked away when things got ugly behind closed doors. I've been working undercover here for 6 months, he continued. And I've seen everything: the data harvesting, the forged reports, the NDAs you forced your employees to sign after harassment complaints, the shell companies, the Cayman transfers, the offshore crypto laundering. I've documented it all. He turned back to Miranda. And tonight, he said, voice steady, you gave me exactly what I needed. She blinked. What are you talking about? Jeremiah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Intent, public humiliation, discrimination, abuse of power, in front of live media, investors, and over 200,000 livestream viewers. He pointed to the small black microphone clipped to his collar. Broadcasted. In real time. Miranda took a step back, then another, and that's when the front doors opened. 2 federal agents stepped inside, suits crisp, badges out. Miranda froze, Because deep down, she knew. This wasn't just a PR disaster. This was the beginning of the end. And the janitor she had just tried to erase was the man who had spent months quietly rewriting her legacy. Miranda Vale wasn't just a name, she was a brand. On the cover of TV, she was dubbed the woman redefining the future. On CNBC she was praised as the most powerful CEO in America under 45. And at exclusive cocktail parties in Washington, D.C., people simply referred to her as the senator's daughter. A title that commanded respect from Wall Street to Capitol Hill. Born into wealth and raised in privilege, Miranda grew up with the certainty that every door would open before she even knocked. She attended a prestigious private high school in Connecticut, where annual tuition matched the average engineer's salary. When it came time for college, she chose Stanford, not because she didn't get into Harvard, but because Silicon Valley was closer. By 28, she'd founded FutureCore, a startup bid on the ambition to reshape the world through AI. And she didn't just dream big, she delivered. In less than a decade, FutureCore became a global tech empire, providing AI solutions to governments, hospitals, banks, and even the Pentagon. Miranda wasn't just a businesswoman, she was power, polished and packaged for the cameras. In the media, Miranda was always immaculate, always dressed in white suits, a symbol of transparency. Always ending her speeches with a line about tech equality for all. Always quoting Maya Angelou or Ruth Bader Ginsburg at Women in Tech panels. But behind the curtain, a different story began to leak. A black employee once shared that Miranda never called him by name. Just maintenance. A female developer recalled being frozen out of major projects after questioning the ethics of their data sourcing. And just last year, an anonymous contact the labor board claimed Miranda used money and influence to force employees into signing NDAs after multiple incidents of harassment and racial bias. But no one ever followed through. Because going up against Miranda Vale was going up against an empire. She knew exactly when to smile, which media consultant to hire, which nonprofits to donate to, and which hashtags the public wanted to hear. Tech for good. AI without bias. Would put ethics first. And that was always enough. Enough to pacify. Enough to turn whistleblowers into difficult personalities. Enough to reframe discrimination as internal miscommunication. Miranda was used to being unquestioned. She didn't know what it meant to be humbled. Only what it meant to crush anything beneath her. So when a man in a janitor's uniform dared to stand up straight, dared to look her in the eye, dared to respond without bowing his head, she didn't just feel insulted. She felt threatened. The air inside FutureCore's grand lobby had gone still, thick, like fog before a storm. Every eye had locked onto a single point, Miranda Vale standing face to face with Jeremiah Brooks, same janitor's uniform, same mop, now tucked quietly into a corner. But Jeremiah was no longer the silent figure gliding through dim hallways after hours. He was standing beneath the full glare of the spotlight, and opposite him was one of the most powerful women in America. Miranda stepped forward. The sharp click of her heels echoing across the marble floor. Each step deliberate, rehearsed. She didn't look at Jeremiah like a person. She looked at him the way one might look at a stain. Something to be scrubbed away. "Let me guess," she sneered, voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You just wanted a glimpse, didn't you? To see how the powerful live, what it feels like to stand among people who matter." Jeremiah didn't respond. He stood still, eyes fixed on hers. Miranda curled her lip into a smile. It held no warmth. "People like you," she continued, pointing at the small name tag on his chest, "don't talk to people like me. You clean up what we leave behind. That's your place." The room stirred. A few guests shifted awkwardly. A couple glanced around, unsure whether they were watching something horrifying or historic. But no one spoke. Miranda was performing now. And she knew it. This was theater. And she owned the stage. You think because you're in a uniform and not a jumpsuit, you're owed respect. Respect is earned. Through education. Through pedigree. Through knowing your place. Each word sliced like glass. But she wasn't done. She lifted her foot, rotating slightly to show off her glimmering stiletto heel. "Do you know how much these cost? $15,000. You'd have to work what? 4 months? 5. Just to afford the soul." The tension in the air turned suffocating. She leaned in slightly, her voice colder now. "But don't worry. You'll never have to. Because people like you aren't invited to live this kind of life." You mop around it, if you're lucky. Jeremiah didn't flinch, no anger, no shame. His gaze never wavered. He was still, calm as a lake surface. But underneath, something powerful was rising. A logistics staffer hesitantly approached Miranda, trying to whisper something. She flicked her hand as if swatting a fly. Not now, she snapped. I'm busy cleaning up a different kind of mess. That sentence, and the smug way she said it, was the final blow. Comments exploded on the live stream. Employees quietly pulled out their phones, recording. A reporter from The Verge stepped back, already on the phone, speaking fast. What Miranda didn't realize was that every camera in the room had already turned toward her. She thought she was in control. She thought she was showing dominance. She thought the audience would laugh with her, nod along, cheer her on. What she failed to see was that her smirk had just become her undoing. And the man she was trying so hard to crush beneath her heels. He was about to bring down the empire she'd spent her life building. Jeremiah didn't move. He wasn't angry. He didn't step back. He didn't argue. For a moment the entire world seemed suspended under the cold, sterile lights of the Future Core lobby. And then, he exhaled. Not a sigh, but the breath of a man who had waited long enough. A man who had prepared for this moment. Are you done? His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. Just a question, simple, measured. But the room vibrated like someone had just plucked a nerve no one knew existed. Miranda's brows knit together. Excuse me. Jeremiah tilted his head slightly, as if he weren't looking at a CEO, but at a child throwing a tantrum to mask her fear. Just wondering, he said slowly, each word landing like a stone, if you finished your performance. A murmur rippled through the room. Miranda's jaw tightened. Performance. Jeremiah nodded gently. Yes. Because that wasn't about me. That was about you. Trying to prove to everyone here that you still own this room. He looked around the lobby, meeting eyes without haste, without hesitation, to prove to your investors, your staff, your livestream audience, and maybe even to yourself, that the throne you're sitting on hasn't started shaking. Miranda inhaled sharply. You're overstepping, Janitor. Jeremiah offered a quiet smile, not sarcastic, not mocking, just steady. I haven't taken a single step forward, Ms. Vale, he replied, but you've been retreating since the moment I didn't flinch. Silence, thick, heavy. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it consumes it. Jeremiah slowly knelt beside the mop bucket. But he didn't pick up the mop. Instead, he pulled out a card. He placed it on the nearest glass table, so gently it made no sound. But everyone saw it, and golden federal emblem gleamed under the lights. Jeremiah stood up, eyes locked on hers. Jeremiah Brooks, Senior Investigator, Federal Trade Commission, Division of Economic Integrity. The gasp in the room was so sharp it could cut glass. Phones were forgotten mid-recording. Investors took a half step back. Miranda's assistant dropped her clipboard with a hollow clatter. And Miranda. She stood there like a building that had just lost its foundation. Jeremiah walked forward, not threatening, not boastful, just a man who had finally been allowed to speak the truth. 6 months ago, he said, voice calm, the FTC began investigating a pattern of violations. Fraudulent reporting, illicit data sales, financial laundering through third-party applications. Every trail led to Future Core. He paused. Long enough for the words to settle into every corner of the room. And that's why I'm here. One sentence. But it landed like a gavel. Miranda opened her mouth, but no words came. Because now, she was the one being looked down on. And the man she once deemed beneath her was now holding the keys to the truth she'd spent her entire life hiding. The grand lobby of Future Core, once a monument to tech dominance, had now become the stage for an unprecedented reversal of power. Jeremiah Brooks, Senior Investigator, Federal Trade Commission. No one saw it coming, no one guessed, and absolutely no one was prepared for this moment. Miranda Vale stood frozen, her face pale, lips trembling, as if the world had tilted and she no longer had weight. Her eyes locked on the badge, trying to mentally erase what she had just seen. No, there's no way. A janitor couldn't be a federal agent. She scanned the room, desperate for someone to step forward. A security guard, a personal assistant, a senior executive. Anyone to intercept the tidal wave crashing down upon her. But everyone remained silent. Some whispered. Others pulled out their phones, not to keep recording, but to start calling their lawyers. Jeremiah didn't move. He didn't need to. Reality had walked toward him instead. I've been monitoring this company's internal operations for the past 6 months. He began, voice steady. The cadence of a man reading from a verdict long written. I've gathered documents, recorded confidential meetings, compiled data from what most thought were harmless elevator chats, cafeteria conversations, even VIP parties. Each word he spoke struck like a hammer against the fragile mask Miranda had so carefully crafted. We've tracked the manipulation of UMs to illegally sell user data to third parties. We've documented shell company wire transfers to offshore funds in the Cayman Islands. We've verified over 22 internal complaints, silenced by payouts and NDAs. The majority involving harassment, discrimination, and employee gag orders. He paused, not for drama, but for respect. Respect for the truth. And then, slowly, the most tragic part is how many people chose silence, out of fear. Out of the belief that power always wins over principle. He turned to Miranda. Just like the way you're looking at me right now. Miranda laughed. But it came out crooked, bitter. You think a few papers, some recordings, a handful of allegations will bring me down. Do you even know who my father is? Jeremiah nodded. I do. And I also know that Senator Vale's office is currently under financial investigation by the Department of Justice. I'm sure you've seen the subpoena delivered to his residence last week. Her Miranda froze. For the first time, her eyes didn't blaze with fury. They trembled with panic. Right then, the revolving doors of the lobby spun open. 2 men in black suits entered. They didn't say a word, they simply held up their badges. Department of Justice, Special Operations. And the room fell into utter silence. Jeremiah turned to them, nodding once. A signal as clear as any command. It's time. Miranda gasped, her breath caught in her throat. She turned toward the audience. The same faces that once bowed their heads now stared back, with new eyes. Cold, judging, ready to walk away. Truth had just entered the room. And it wore a uniform no one expected. That of a janitor. With a file thick enough to bring an empire to its knees. Jeremiah didn't say a word as the federal agents walked in. He just stood there, silently observing. Like a man who had waited for this moment far too long. But didn't need the applause. Because he knew, the real fight had started long ago. 6 months earlier, when his name was erased from the system of a major investment bank, for whistleblowing on insider trading. He understood one thing clearly. Doing the right thing would never come easy. His file was blacklisted. Rejection letters came in waves. Not a cultural fit. Too overqualified. Position has been closed. And then came the call. A voice on the other end. Agent Carter. Federal Trade Commission. We have a situation inside FutureCore. We need someone who can disappear in plain sight. You in? Jeremiah didn't hesitate. That day, he shelved his resume, deleted his LinkedIn, put away the gray suit he used to wear like armor, and put on a different uniform. Dark blue. Faint bleach stains. A plastic name tag that read Brooks J. He became someone no one noticed. The janitor on the 15th floor. The guy who cleaned the maintenance closets. The man mopping the lobby on night shift. The man every executive walked past without ever nodding. That invisibility. It became his greatest power. He overheard senior engineers in the restroom planning how to tweak the AI algorithm to shape public opinion online. He picked up a crumpled printout with offshore bank codes. A perfect match to the crypto laundering logs. He personally heard the HR director discussing how to quietly handle whistleblowers so it won't affect IPO projections. He documented it all. Recorded, encrypted, and uploaded weekly through a hidden port inside his mop handle. Operation codename Silent Circuit. Objective expose FutureCore. Duration 6 months. Infiltration point. The one employee no one pays attention to. Jeremiah wasn't a spy. Wasn't special ops. He was a man who had once been stepped on. So he knew exactly what that footprint felt like. He didn't need to be extraordinary. Just observant, patient, and silent, until the time was right. And tonight, at the very gala where Miranda Vale thought she would unveil her revolutionary AI breakthrough, the truth unveiled itself. She was standing on the ruins of the empire she built with her own lies. Jeremiah walked toward the agents. He gave a short nod. Everything's ready. Audio logs, time-stamped memos, chain of custody records. You'll find the rest in the encrypted cloud. Miranda stumbled back, one step, then another. Her voice cracked, dry and desperate. Wait, you don't understand, I built this place. Jeremiah met her eyes. And now, you get to watch it fall. Miranda didn't know, but everything she had just said, every cutting remark, every sneer, every word laced with subtle cruelty, had already slipped beyond her control. Because the moment she opened her mouth to speak to Jeremiah, a different kind of data stream had already begun. A camera, a mic, a secure uplink to FTC's internal media servers. Tonight's gala, which was supposed to livestream only the product reveal, had become something else entirely. A live exposé, a real-time reckoning, a broadcast of power, unraveling. Just 10 miles away, in a modest control room, a team of legal monitors, media supervisors, and federal agents stared at a giant wall of screens. Thousands of viewers, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Miranda Val exposed for Justice in real-time. Fate Silicon Fall. A young producer with a headset turned to Agent Carter, her eyes wide. It's happening. She's gone viral. Over 400,000 people are watching, and rising fast. Back in the Grand Hall, Miranda still didn't know. But she could feel it. She could feel the shift. The stares were no longer reverent, no longer cautious, no longer afraid of her title. They were distant, cold, preparing to step off the orbit of a star that was about to crash. She saw her assistant looking down, refusing eye contact. The CFO whispering urgently to legal counsel. And those investors, the ones who once called her the female Elon Musk, quietly, cashing out. Then her phone buzzed. Once, 5 times, 13 missed calls. Names lit up the screen. Legal team. Dad's office. PR unit. News Channel 9. Then a text appeared. We're trending. In the worst way possible. She tapped it. And there it was. CEO humiliates black janitor. Then gets exposed as criminal. Views, 579,000 shares. 2,000 comments, over 50 Olu climbing by the second. She scrolled. She's everything wrong with corporate America. This is why representation matters. You think power protects you. Not anymore. His silence was louder than her entire empire. Miranda felt her knees weaken. Who gave permission to broadcast this? She snapped, spinning toward Jeremiah. He looked at her, not with anger, not with triumph, just clarity. The calm of someone who knows one thing: justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs to arrive on time. Standard protocol for public interest operations. He replied quietly. Especially when justice needs to be seen, not just served. Outside, reporters had begun to arrive. A news van pulled up outside Future Core's glass entrance. Flashbulbs lit the pavement. A field anchor stood facing the lens. This is no longer just a tech scandal. This is a cultural reckoning. And inside, beneath the white lights of the once invincible Future Core lobby, Miranda Vale, a symbol once untouchable, finally understood. The thing she feared most wasn't being arrested. It was being seen, exactly when she had nothing left to hide. The first silence was broken by a trembling voice from the far end of the hall. I was an intern here last year, the girl said, stepping out from the rows near the media section. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was timed, and it was enough to silence the entire room. Her name was Annie Tran, a data science major at UC Berkeley, once part of the AI development team at FutureCore during Q2 of last year, and also one of many who left in silence, carrying things no one wanted to hear, and no one was willing to believe. I reported how the company's algorithm was being adjusted to push extremist political content to communities of color. Annie said, locking eyes with Miranda. I was called into legal, pressured to sign an NDA. I was locked out of the system, cut off from every major meeting after that. For the first time, Miranda turned away, and for the first time, no one stepped in to shield her. A middle-aged man in a gray suit stepped forward next. My name is Thomas Mitchell, former chief technical director. I resigned after I refused to falsify performance reports before a shareholders' meeting. They labeled me not a cultural fit. But the truth is, I just refused to lie. His voice wasn't bitter. It was relieved. Because some truths stay in your chest for so long, when you finally let them out, it's no longer anger. It's freedom. Then came a third, a fourth. A female engineer who was reassigned after reporting harassment. A warehouse worker fired for safety violations, after refusing to turn off cameras while a senior exec accepted an unmarked delivery. A black employee once referred to Miranda's diversity project. In the middle of a board meeting, they stepped forward. No longer afraid, no longer alone, because now, they weren't just isolated incidents. They were a pattern, a mosaic of stories Jeremiah had patiently and silently uncovered, woven together with care, strategy, and purpose. Miranda stood frozen, arms limp at her sides. The hands that once signed million-dollar deals now trembled uncontrollably. She no longer had the authority to speak, no longer had control of the narrative, because the narrative now belonged to those who had once been silenced. Jeremiah watched them rise from the crowd, and he smiled, not out of victory, but because he knew they were the most important part of this mission. "I didn't come here to expose Miranda Vale," he said slowly. "I came here so the truth could finally have a voice, and that voice today is yours." The applause began, not loud, not in sync, but real. And for the first time in years, in the very building that once echoed with fear and unchecked power, people stood together for justice. The shock waves from that night didn't stop at the polished floors of Future Core HQ, they rippled outward, like a slow, layered explosion. From the glass walls of the San Francisco headquarters, to the halls of Congress in Washington, D.C., to courtrooms in New York City, and finally, to the screens of millions of phones across America. 3 days later, Miranda Vale was officially indicted on 7 federal charges: securities fraud, international money laundering, illegal exploitation of user data, coercive and unlawful NDAs, evidence tampering in sexual harassment cases, systemic discrimination in the workplace, and for the first time ever under newly amended social justice laws, a federal charge for public hate-based misconduct in a corporate setting. She was held without bail, and those who once orbited around her, chief legal officer, comms advisor, internal compliance chief, were all subpoenaed one by one. At the preliminary hearing, one image went viral. Miranda Vale, once hailed as the AI goddess of Silicon Valley, now sat motionless in an orange jumpsuit, eyes sunken, hands folded in front of her as if trying to hold on to the last shards of power she once owned. She didn't look at anyone. And for the first time, she didn't smile. The slogans she once touted, "The future's fair," "AI for all," "Tech without borders," were now printed on protest banners, not to celebrate her vision, but to expose the hypocrisy of an empire. FutureCore, after a stunning 62% stock collapse in just 7 days, filed for federal bankruptcy protection and restructuring. Hundreds of employees were relocated to rising tech startups, companies that pledged transparency, inclusion, and integrity. And then, something unprecedented happened in the world of tech. An independent oversight board, comprised of the FTC, Department of Labor, and minority community leaders, was granted legal authority to supervise the full transfer of FutureCore's intellectual property to a nonprofit coalition, tasked with rebuilding AI systems that were fair, bias-free, and shielded from political or corporate influence. As for Jeremiah, he never spoke to the press. He didn't go on talk shows. He didn't release a book. He didn't monetize the moment. He simply returned to his work. This time, not in the shadows, but from within the main offices of the Federal Trade Commission, but at a quiet ceremony at his alma mater, a university he once attended on a full scholarship funded by his local community. He was invited to speak, and he said just one thing: justice isn't when the powerful fall. Justice is when those who've been hurt stand tall, and never have to bow again. And that, above all, was what changed. Not just the fall of a woman, not just the unraveling of an empire, but the dismantling of a system once believed untouchable. A system now forced to answer to those it once deemed too invisible to matter. Jeremiah didn't go home right after the hearing ended. He stayed behind, alone, in his office at the FTC headquarters, the soft amber light casting gentle reflections on the glass window overlooking the city, now swallowed by the haze of late evening fog. From here, he could still see the old FutureCore building, now stripped of its logo, its glass doors sealed with brighter asset control notices. People were still stopping to take pictures, live streaming, gossiping on sidewalks. But to Jeremiah, that scene was no longer a battlefield. It was just a muted backdrop to a story that had already closed. Not because he didn't care, but because he had already walked through it. 6 months as a janitor, 6 months of mopping floors, overhearing conversations, taking mental notes, and enduring silence without pushing back. Not because he was weak, but because he chose not to fight the way they expected. He remembered his first day at FutureCore. No one greeted him. No one asked his name. No one made eye contact. And then, on his last day, everyone saw him. But the moment that stayed with him the most wasn't the flashbulbs, wasn't the headlines, wasn't even the applause. It was later that night, when he returned to his small apartment in East Oakland, where his mother, who had raised him through decades of cleaning houses and cooking night shifts, waited for him at the kitchen table. She didn't ask questions. She wasn't surprised. She simply poured him a cup of tea, slid it across the table, and said, "You've still got your father's eyes." Steady, but never backing down. Jeremiah sat there, hands wrapped around the warm mug, and for the first time in years, he felt light, not because he had taken someone down, but because he no longer had to raise his voice to prove he belonged. His silence, his actions, his relentless patience in pursuit of the truth, they had spoken louder than any spotlight ever could. A week later, he declined an invitation from 60 Minutes. Turned down 2 book deals. Said no to a part-time teaching offer from an Ivy League school. Instead, he returned to his East Oakland roots and opened a small center for financial literacy and tech skills training for young Black men. Just a modest space. A whiteboard, a scholarship fund stitched together by community donations. No cameras. No accolades. Just the beginning of a new chapter. Because Jeremiah understood something deeply. Justice doesn't end in a courtroom. It begins within. Victory isn't stepping over others. It's refusing to let your dignity be trampled, even when you're made to feel invisible. And for Jeremiah Brooks, the most powerful thing he ever did was stay true to himself, in a world that tried its best to erase him. Some stories end with applause, some with the bang of a judge's gavel, but this one ends with a silence, full of gratitude, not for the victor, not for the fallen, but for the truth, finally spoken. Jeremiah Brooks never set foot in FutureCore again. That building no longer belonged to his past. And he no longer needed it to prove anything to anyone, because what he reclaimed wasn't a job, wasn't a title, wasn't wealth. It was dignity. The very thing society had once tried to make him forget he ever had. This story isn't just about a fallen CEO, or an undercover agent who cracked a case with intellect and patience. It's a reminder in a world run by power and prejudice. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is watch in silence and speak the truth at the right time. People won't remember Jeremiah for the uniform he wore. They'll remember how he stood, unshaken in the storm, how he didn't stoop for revenge, but rose with dignity for something greater. Because lashing out is easy, but responding with integrity, in silence, is what makes the world truly listen. If you've ever been looked down on because of the work you do, if you've ever been judged by your skin color, your accent, or where you came from, if you've ever stayed quiet because you thought your voice wasn't loud enough, remember this: you don't need to shout to be seen. You just need to stand long enough and in the right place. Because eventually, the light will find those who quietly kept the fire. And the truth, no matter how long it's been buried, always finds a way to rise. In the end, the most powerful part of this story isn't that Miranda Vale was arrested, or that FutureCore collapsed. It's that one man chose not to lose himself. And that's the kind of victory no one can take away. Have you ever been the one unheard? Have you ever stayed silent? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you feared it wouldn't matter. Share your story. Because you never know who it might empower. And if you believe that justice doesn't come from power, but from courage, then share this story. Not for the views, but because someone out there needs to know they're not invisible. Because sometimes, the most powerful badge isn't in your wallet. It's the one you carry in your heart, and when you hold on to it, no one can take your worth away.